This is ILLUMENATE, the podcast about men with good hearts, open minds, and a desire to make the world better. Welcome to ILLUMENATE. I'm your host, Chris Tidrick, and I'm here with Zach Millimet. Zach recently retired after a 20-year career at the Central Intelligence Agency, where he served the agency's Directorate of Operations with assignments in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and South Asia. After a major career pivot, he is now the Director of Government Affairs for a climate tech startup in Minnesota. Welcome to the show, Zach.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, so I like jumping right in with a question about motivation. So what's your why? Where do you find purpose and what drives you?
Yeah, so my why is pretty simple, I think. I want to make a difference in the world and I want to help people. And obviously there's more to unpack with that. Obviously, just from the intro, I just finished up a 20-year career at the CIA. That is a group of people, and we are a group of people that are like purpose-driven, motivated-driven. I joined the CIA shortly after 9/11, so that was like a driving factor. But it does, for me, that why goes back to like childhood for me. I always sort of had this sense growing up that I want to do something that's going to make a difference in the world. And that was really instilled upon me, not just sort of innately in who I was, but my grandfather was the biggest sort of like male role model in my early part of my life. And he was just, always talking to me about service and about helping others, and like that it was a responsibility. And it wasn't heavy-handed, but it was just this thing that permeated the household, permeated my life. And so that's my why. And of course, I'm 52, so there's been an evolution to that. When I was younger, of course, it was much more, let's just say it was a little bit more mixed up with like my own ego and my own sense of like a career and, promotions and those sorts of things. Still, I was driven to want to make a difference, but it was a little bit more wrapped up in my sense of, externals, shall we say. And
tell me a little bit about your experiences, because, we're all kind of made up of our experiences. So like, what were those sort of significant moments, significant time periods of your life that kind of got you to this place at 52?
Let's back that up for a second. I'm going to get to 9/11 in a second. But again, in terms of significant experiences, I grew up without a dad. From the jump, my real father actually left my mom before I was born. So truly grew up without a dad. And I had my grandfather, and I had other really great role models. I can't tell you why, but it was just, there was still this lack in my life. And so as a young person, it was, and as a young man in the 70s and 80s, and I was like this skinny kid, and it was really sort of tough. And I was always sort of struggling in terms of putting it all together, what it meant to be a man, what it meant to be, just a good person. So that was like a real foundational issue for me. And when I was in fifth grade, my mom got remarried, and I had a stepfather, and that was sort of like this aha moment, right? He was really different kind of person, but he was the kind of person that would, I grew up in rural, pretty, rural New England, right, in New Hampshire, and taught me how to ride dirt bikes and shoot guns and hunt and fish and, all these sort of stereotypical things that people do in rural America. And it was pretty awesome, right? And it sort of filled up this other side of me that had been sort of had a lot of these unmet needs. And that sort of started to launch me off into, early adulthood and later teen years and going off to college. And so that was really super foundational. let me jump ahead to 9/11, but I want to jump back after that. So 9/11, right? I was living in New York City, 25, and my office happened to be 10 blocks from the towers, and the office next to mine looked right out at them. And it was Tuesday morning. The Giants had played on Monday Night Football, and we're just having coffee and looking out that window like we would normally do. That's how the first plane hit. And
wow,
everyone's got a story from that day. But that was pretty visceral, and I remember everything about that day. The sounds of people screaming when the first tower fell. I was working for a large NGO at the time, and we were at the time New York City's largest health and human services provider, and so we had developmentally disabled people, mentally, people with mental health issues in jobs programs all over the city, including at the Twin Towers, and it was this massive scramble to try and figure out where people were and on the street when the other towers fell. It was just changed my life, right? Changed so many of our people's lives, right?
Yeah. It's just such a horrific experience.
Yeah, it was. And, but so that got me thinking, I'm not unique, right? We had a whole generation of officers at the CIA come through, join, either right after 9/11 or in those 5 years. And so that was that was really sort of the thing that happened, right? The seminal event in my life that transformed my professional journey. Talking about other sort of seminal events in my life. I wasn't religious growing up, so I'm pretty religious now, but I wasn't religious growing up. My grandfather was a Ukrainian Jew that told his kids that there was no God, and then sent them to Sunday school.
That's not unbelievable. So
no, right? So we weren't religious, and my mom was really new, into the new age stuff back in the 80s, right? We had a lot of crystals around the house.
Okay.
And I was living in Washington State, and it was 1997, and driving down the highway, going to Seattle. I had this massive panic attack. I'd never had a panic attack before. It was I'm going to die. Not I'm going to get hit by this truck that's going to come kill me, but existentially, I'm going to die someday. And I had never had that. I was a young man, right? Haven't given it two thoughts. Settle down. Happens again about a week later. Same thing. And so I gotta figure this out, right? This is clearly not gonna keep working for me. Maybe for some people they would deal with it in a different way, but for me it was I've gotta find some sort of faith. I had never been, again, there was no sort of church of origin to kind of fall back upon. I was raised Catholic, and so I'm just going to go back to the Catholic Church, and I was never particularly drawn to Christianity per se, So I sort of just started exploring a bunch of different sort of more Eastern-y religions, and to make a long story short, so I tried a couple different things out, and then to make a long story short, I did end up I became a Buddhist. I've been a Buddhist for almost 30 years, and it was it's been a huge part of my life. I was a Buddhist teacher for a long time, taught meditation. I taught meditation when I was at the CIA in Afghanistan, which was really cool. Getting a bunch of big burly dudes with guns, and they put their guns down and they'd come and sit and meditate.
Probably not a bad practice for people in stressful situations.
Absolutely. Getting married, right? Getting married, having kids. My wife and I have been together. We've been married almost 23 years. 23 years this summer. We've been together 25. My daughter's 18, my son's 16. There was a lot of ups and downs in any relationship, and most of those were my fault. But we're in this amazing place, and we've never been happier, but transformative, right? Like, it really forced me to work on myself and to be less focused on myself. And then becoming a father, as we talked about earlier, right? I grew up without a dad for a long time. And so, like, sort of like full circle, right? Wanting to be a good dad. And I knew I knew I wanted kids, but I never sort of realized that I was a kid person until we had kids. And then I realized, like, I loved everybody's kids.
So let me ask you here, how did that hit you when you first had kids, and like that realization of, like, I didn't have a dad, but now I'm a dad? And I ask that because, like, I did grow up with a father, but was not very close to him. He ended up leaving my mother when I was 27, and I don't have a relationship with him anymore. And so, my entire time as a father, my son is almost 24. My entire time as a father, I have not had a father to sort of lean back into. And I know how that felt for me. So I'm, like, really curious as to, like, how that hit you. Like, all of a sudden, like, I'm a dad, but I don't have one of those. Like, so how did that feel for you?
So that's a great question. Early on, I was not super cognizant of it because as it sort of, when our daughter was born, right? So I just retired from the CIA at 20 years. My daughter's 18. So I was still very much, like, in the very early start of my career, a lot of training. So, like, the first year of our daughter's life, I missed a year of it. I was away at different trainings and different things, just doing stuff. And I was something I'm not super proud of, right? And there's a lot of downside, a lot of, when you join the CIA, right? Your family joins too, but they don't choose it. They just have to get brought along for the ride. And there's a lot of hardship that's for them. And so I was I was way too focused on my own career at the same time. And it wasn't until we got a little bit further into being a parent that I sort of settled in and was like, I can swear, right? Like, I fucking love this. There's nothing I love more than being a dad. But it took me a little while. And it wasn't about the kids, it was about me. But you bring up a good point, right? Like, I don't have a father who I can call and be like, hey, Dad, I'm really struggling with this issue, or this happened with the kids, or this happened with my wife, and, I could use some advice. I don't have that. Now, my wife is a therapist, mental health, and she's like a savant when it comes to, like, one of her other skills is that she's like a savant when it comes to, like, how to raise kids. Everything I know about being a good parent, I learned from her, like, every single thing. And she'd look at me and she'd be like, you want a good relationship with your kids, right? I'm like, yeah. She's like, don't do that.
Yeah, I could see that being a good resource for you, for sure.
I wasn't always receptive to it early on, but she hasn't steered me wrong.
I can
she's
imagine.
Always been right.
Yeah.
But like now, it's sort of like, as we have, a young adult child and a soon-to-be young adult child, right? Like, it's amazing. The whole journey's been amazing. And now that we have and you have a son who's 24, now that we have teenagers, I always tell this to people who have, like, young teenagers, because they're starting to, like, panic about, like, oh, my kids don't want to spend as much time with me. And, I'm not handling it well. And it's okay. They're doing, this was advice from my mother-in-law very early on, was at whatever age they're at, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And that's super true.
Yeah. Yes. That's great advice.
And then,
that is very true.
My wife helped teach me this. And is like, when you meet your kids where they're at, like, truly meet them where they're at, like, whatever they're going through, whatever stage they're in, particularly as they get to be older, and you embrace their journey for them, your kids are thrilled. Like we have amazing relationships with our two teenagers because we've just embraced them as who they are as people, where they are in their own life journey.
Yeah, I had this moment. It was actually the first time I saw my son in the hospital nursery. I like walked in there and something like it was almost like I heard a voice that said, "He's going to be fine. Don't fuck him up." And like awesome. that has been my like overriding philosophy of parenting is he's gonna be fine. He will find his way. Like be there for him and sort of like you were saying, meet them where they are. Like I love that way that you frame that.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, no, it's true. I missed the birth of our son. That was tough. We were in Albania, and my wife, the U.S. government doesn't let people give birth in Albania because, the healthcare is not great. And so she had gone back to the States to give birth, and she ended up going into labor early. And I was driving, for work. It's like 5, 6 o'clock at night, and my phone rings, and I just knew. Like the phone rang, and I saw it was her, and I'm like, I knew what that call was.
Did you bring the kids and family to where you were stationed all the time?
Yeah, everywhere except Afghanistan. Wow. No families in war zones.
Yeah, fair. Yeah.
But everywhere. We first went overseas, and our daughter was. Our son wasn't born, and our daughter was a little over 1, right? So, they were very little. So coming back from Afghanistan, I was not. That was like that was like my last overseas tour. So end of 16 into end of 17, and it's not. I didn't see combat per se, but it was a rough time when I was there. We lost a few officers. We had some very major terrorist attacks. It was tough, and I was not in good shape. And I was not particularly aware that I was in good shape. Definitely, a degree of like sort of PTSD, and our daughter was really struggling with some issues. She was really angry at me, but she was still young enough where she couldn't quite say that. But so we had a lot of like behavioral issues, and that was sort of like the low point of me as I was certainly struggling as a person, but certainly a low point of me as a dad and a husband. And it wasn't great. It was really, really rocky. And I started to get help. It took me a little bit to sort of find the right therapist. I went through a couple that weren't really the right ones for me. I would also freely admit that I wasn't quite ready to put in the work. But eventually I found the right therapist, and she was amazing and just, helped me transform my life. But there's not a lot of good things I can say about the pandemic. I mean, the pandemic was horrible, but it did allow something to change in our life and in my life. When you work for the CIA, you can't work from home. So the pandemic happened, and everybody got sent home for, I think, 4 months. And they said, don't go anywhere. If we need you, we'll call you. But otherwise, just stay home. And our kids were little, and so we had to deal with online school. And my wife was working and from home, and she got not formally diagnosed, but she got long COVID pretty early on, and I had to step the fuck up. I had to get my shit together and step up and just truly pull my weight for the first time, and deliver for everybody. And I did.
How did that feel for you?
It was amazing. I mean, it happened over time, right? And so, and it's a combination of just that, started to transform my relationship with kids. It started to transform my wife and I's relationship. It really helped me. Again, like I said, I was getting better emotionally, but it just transformed my life, transformed our lives. And yeah, I mean, it's not obviously because of the pandemic, but it was like this thing that happened that forced us to change the way that we were all living. That I was able to like finally do the work. You know, you see this online a lot, right? You know, men have to do the work and they have to step up, and that was that moment for me.
Yeah, I think it's when we have these disaster moments, and I think the pandemic is one of those disaster moments. Like it brings out the worst in people, and we've seen that. It also brings out the best in people, and like I think we all learned a lot about ourselves during the pandemic, and a lot of it was good. So it sounds like you found a lot of good in yourself during that time.
It did. I did. We did as a family. Yeah, I mean, I would never wish the pandemic. I mean, of course, I wish the pandemic had never happened. There's been so many bad things, but for us, me as a person and us as a family, we were able to really, come out of it in a very different way. And then, not too long after, so when our daughter was going into ninth grade, she came down with. Have you ever heard of? I don't know if you've ever heard of this. Cyclic vomiting syndrome. It's as bad as it sounds. It's a condition, right, where you have these horrible, brutal bouts of intense nausea and vomiting. And it's not like for an evening. It can be a week. It can be 2 weeks. It can be a month. And so she was going into high school and she got sick. And as you can imagine, sort of all of the physical, emotional, mental health challenges that come along with that. Her high school, I'm going to skip to the end for a hot second. She's doing great. She's this amazing human being who is going off to college. We couldn't be more proud of the young woman she is. Like, she's amazing. But her high school career was brutal. And it was incredibly hard for us as a family. But it wasn't hard for my wife. A lot of times these kind of situations can tear families, can tear couples apart. And it was the opposite for us. I mean, we are closer now than we've ever been. We supported each other. We supported our son. We supported our daughter. And like, for me as a person, but also for my wife and I, like, again, we were able to come through the crucible of an incredibly difficult time. And again, we came out stronger on the other end. And I'm so proud. I mean, first and foremost, I'm so proud of our daughter for what she went through and what she's dealt with, and the person that she is. And for my wife and I, we feel incredibly blessed that we're able to get through this. But again, talk about like these transformative moments, right, in your life, and that was one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've gone through a ton of trauma. You've gone through a ton of really difficult moments. We all have these moments in our lives that sort of define us, and the struggles that we go through. You and I met on Threads. And I think we post a lot of relatively similar content on Threads. Yes. I think we're very much aligned. We're very, very much in the men, you need to get your act together kind of camp. So I want to ask you, like, what does being a healthy man in today's world look like to you?
Man, that's I mean, one, that's like the $1 million question as a man. But really, when you look at what's going on in the world, and certainly in a not just in America, but this is a problem. I mean, it's such a problem. So I spent a lot of my early life trying to figure this out for myself, right? Like I said, I grew up without a dad and trying to figure this out. And I was thinking about this the other day, like, I feel pretty fortunate that I didn't have the internet, and that there was no possibility to get like sucked into, Groyper male influencer communities in the 1980s and 90s, right? That just didn't exist. Like, this was pre-internet. So what did my parents do? They sent me like on a men's yoga retreat, like which was fantastic, right? But so seriously, I think about this a lot. And I think part of the problem is that we're looking for a definition of what it is to be a healthy man. Everybody's different. If you think about, like, if you're religious and you think, like, God the Father, Divine Mother, yin and yang, like there's all, in any spiritual or religious tradition, or even like, there's this concept of like the duality, right? Like the masculine and the feminine. And I think part of the problem is we're looking to like it be one or the other.
I'm very rapidly coming to this place of it's about being a healthy human.
Yeah, no, I guess you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah,
that's where I was going with this, right? Being having a society, right, and having a structure around ourselves where we can be true to ourselves, like truly like who we are internally, the masculine, the feminine, and the entire spectrum of each individual human being is got all of it. And what does that mean for me is different than what that means for you is different. What that means, and it's that balance that's unique in every single person, and being true to that, and not believing that you have to be a man in a certain way. There's no right way to be a man other than to be a great human being that is in touch with your feelings and in touch with your emotions and is supportive of the people around you, men, women, animals, and finding your own path to truly make the world, like, in your own way, to make the world better than you found it and to help everybody else around you. If you're a parent, if you're a father, well, then certainly it means being a good father. If you're married or in a relationship, it means being a good partner to that person, who they are. I post about it a little bit, but it drives me, like this whole like men should be the protector and the provider. I mean, I just want to like throw my phone across the room and just scream at people,
Yeah, they claim they want to be protector and provider, but they don't even have any idea what that means. What they really mean is they want to be the controller.
I think about this a lot, right? And I think about this not just as a man, but as a human being, right? Where I talked a little bit about earlier on about sort of my evolution. It's like about my why and like what I want to do in the world. And obviously I'm doing something different professionally, and that's a different why, an evolution of my own story, right? I want to like deal with the climate crisis and climate change. But also just as a human being, like I get so much more joy in life when I'm like helping other people and helping lift them up, whether it's my kids or my wife, certainly my current colleagues, but even more so, over a longitudinal period of time, my former colleagues at the agency, people I just sort of know casually on threads, but just like helping other people, like help wherever they are, like lifting them up and helping them. That is what makes me feel like a good human being.
Yeah, you mentioned evolution. I love that word. I talk a lot about growth on this podcast. And in the context of growth, I talk about deconstruction and like leaving behind some of those things that we held very tightly earlier in our lives that no longer serve us. So I'd like to hear, is there anything like, is there like a big thing that you had to go, whoa, that doesn't work for me anymore, even though I held it like really deeply early in life?
So the quick answer to that is, what haven't I had to deconstruct? I mean, seriously. So I talked a little bit about my upbringing growing up, and it was, on one hand, right, it was easy in the sense that like my mom and I struggled, but like my grandparents were, for the time, fairly wealthy. And so like, I didn't want for anything like physical things, right? With plenty of money, plenty of food, I didn't struggle in that way. But there was some mental illness in our family. There was a lot of chaos, a lot of trauma, a lot of tough stuff. And I was the eldest grandchild, and to say that I developed a lifetime of maladaptive coping strategies is an understatement. And I brought a ton of baggage into our marriage. I met my wife, we got married, going to join CIA, relatively soon thereafter. But I brought a time bomb worth of baggage into our marriage. And I think I'm going to feel guilty about that to the day I die. Totally transformed as a human being, as a husband and a father, but I just did, right? I brought in, I backed up the Brinks truck of garbage, into our marriage. And to be honest, right, I had no business getting married early on. So it took me a long time to sort of understand where that came from, how I was not coping properly, how I was acting in the world that was maybe not helping others, where I was super selfish. So that was a big deconstruction. And what did I do? I worked on it throughout our marriage, but and throughout my life, but a lot of the heavy lifting came when I got back from Afghanistan. And that was sort of when I was finally ready to do the work. And I wish it didn't take that long, but it did. Less traumatic, right? But deconstruction is, I just retired from the CIA. That has been a 20-year career. It's not just a job. It's a culture. It's a way of life. It's a way of living in the world. And that's come to an end. Not negatively. I was ready to leave. I knew I was going to retire, but I felt great. When I retired, when I walked out that door for the last time, I felt a real sense of completeness and wholeness. Nothing left undone. But I am having to reinvent. I'm reinventing myself, right? I had this entire life of seeing myself in one way as a CIA officer, and now I'm not that. I was that, but so total deconstruction of that old life and building a new one.
I think a lot of men, they identify with their work so deeply that when they leave it, in most cases it's retirement. In your case, it's not. It's retirement, but you're still, you're starting a new career. But there's this identity piece that you're okay, what am I now? Have you been feeling that?
So, no. But because I knew when I came back from Afghanistan at the end of 2017 that when I was retirement eligible, I was going to do it, and that I wanted to do something different. So I have been laying the groundwork for this since the pandemic. It impacted sort of jobs I took. I did a out-of-body assignment working on the Hill. I was working, anyway, I spent 5-6 years laying the groundwork to make this transition. So it has been about
so you're intentional in your deconstruction. Yeah.
Yes. No, I was absolutely. Yeah. It was intentional deconstruction. The problem was there was plenty of times where I felt I was ready to go, but I'm well, I still have 3 years left. And the last thing I would say, not the last thing, but another thing that I am working on deconstructing and sort of figuring out anew, as I said, I'm a practicing Buddhist and a teacher. And when our daughter got sick, I couldn't meditate. I couldn't. I could not sit down and meditate. Every bit of meaning that I had gotten out of my spiritual practice went out the window. I just couldn't. It was like a bomb had gone off in our house with regards to her health. And it was like a bomb had gone inside myself regarding my spiritual practice. And that is still very much a work in progress. I don't know if I'm going to stay a Buddhist. I may do something different. It's getting better, but it's definitely been another thing that I've had to learn to approach from a different angle because what had been working for me in my spiritual life was no longer working.
What, if you don't mind me asking, what do you think it was about your daughter's illness that like disrupted you, like that unsettled you so that you couldn't sort of be in that moment?
That is the $1,000,000 question. I don't know. And I wish I did, right? I spent a lot of time talking to people, trying to meditate, talking to, other, people of faith. I wish I had an answer, but I actually really don't, because it literally was like something just like, when you break a bone, it just breaks, right? And the healing takes a long time, but the break is like that. That is the best analogy I can give. It was like she got sick and something about my spiritual life broke. And it's been a slow process of healing and recovery.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. One of the things I haven't heard as a thread through your story is community. And maybe that's the nature of the fact that you've just been all over the world and you're sort of in and out of societies. And but like, where do you find and create community? I'm curious.
Yeah, no, you're onto something. So certainly the CIA was a huge part of our family community. But when you're moving overseas all the time and going from post to post, you're always having to rebuild that sense of community. And that can be really hard. For some people, it comes more naturally, easier. It wasn't particularly easy for us. And what that meant, and what's happened to lots of expat families, is like our nuclear family became incredibly close. It was like the four of us moving around a bit. Other parts of community for us, we've been back in the States now since, as a family, since the beginning of end of 17, early 18. Certainly, the Buddhist Center, that was a big part of community. For us, where we live in Northern Virginia, we haven't moved to Minnesota yet. That's coming. But in Northern Virginia, like there's these big like pool communities that are people gather in the summer. Summer swim is a big deal here in Northern Virginia, and so like that's a big part of our community. But I'll be honest, right? Like we've struggled to establish community. Because we had moved so much, because when we came back, it's sort of like the movie term in media res, like the movie's going and like suddenly you just plop into it, but everyone else has been in their life for like 5, 10, 15 years, and suddenly you're like, we're here. And so that's something that we've struggled with. Especially for like my wife and I, like the kids have great friends and they're like super squared away. But it's something that we do struggle with. Yeah,
that the nuclear family being your community, the consistency across time is, I can absolutely see that with the context of your life. So I want to shift into what I call the slow rolling thunder round. And used to be called the lightning round, but it never goes that fast. So we're got 12 questions. They're intended to have relatively short answers. We might dive a little bit into one or two of them as we go. If something seems like really like, oh, I want to dive into that a little bit more, I reserve the right to ask follow-up questions to the individual questions. But what are your top 3 values?
Yeah. So top 3 values. Compassion and intellectual curiosity, and like giving, like a mind of generosity.
What's your favorite emotion?
That's an easy one. I love love. I'm a sucker for it. I love it.
Tell me more about that. Why?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm the mushy one in our relationship.
I love romantic movies. I cry at holiday movies. Like I just um, when I whether it's like love in my own life, for my wife, for my kids, for my friends, whether it's like people I know who are like, like happy or in love or loving each other or just acts of love. It just brings me an unbelievable amount of joy.
What's your least favorite emotion?
That's it. Also an easy one, anger. And I'll give you a follow-up because I had a really bad relationship with like my own anger for a long time. And it wasn't that I was like always getting angry, although, it happened at times in my life, but I was afraid of it. I didn't have the tools how to deal with it. And so I would suppress it. Super unhealthy, super unhelpful.
Yeah, anger is a secondary emotion to me. There's always something underneath it that's the real emotion, and anger is just the response to that, not dealing with that emotion.
100%. Totally agree.
So where can you feel the most yourself?
So, two places, and they're going to seem strange. They're going to seem diametrically opposed to each other. One, when I'm with my family, um, pets included. We've talked about how we are like a really tight nuclear family, and so that's the first place. And the second one is in the wilderness, all by myself. Um, at least once a year, I like to go on like a week-long backcountry trip, and you know, part of the ranking of how good that trip is like I want to see less than like five people like over the course of the week. Um, like I love to just be in the wilderness by myself. Um, I find it unbelievably peaceful.
I agree with you. I'm with you on that. Like that's the only time I prefer to be alone is when I'm in nature. I can share it with people, but like if I'm alone anywhere else, I'm unsettled. But alone in nature, I don't feel alone. I feel connected.
I think you are connected.
What's one way that you try to make the world a better place?
Definitely now, where I'm at today in my life, a lot of it's all about how can I lift other people up. Yes, doing my part to try and deal with like the climate crisis and promote clean energy and like I think that it makes a difference, right? That's important. Um, but helping people around me, and everything from like the immediate, supporting my wife, supporting my friends, supporting our kids. Like you see this on threads, like someone's like, I got into a PhD program, and everyone's like, congratulations, you rock. And like that's like super exciting, right? Like total strangers, but to be able to like give them some uplift and some joy and revel in their accomplishments or help them feel a little bit of like a less, maybe they're not quite as alone as they might feel. I love it.
What do you want other men to see in you?
I mean, you kind of touched on this, right? Like I have been through a fair amount of trauma in my life, and that um, to not be afraid of your emotions, healing is absolutely possible. Transformation of your life is possible. Being a better man, a better human, whatever that is for you, it is possible. Um, and and that they deserve it. Like they deserve it, and the people in their lives deserve it.
Amen. You could not have said that better. Amen. Like, yes. Um, what makes you most proud of yourself?
Well, if you would have asked me my second least favorite emotion, I would have said pride. Um,
It's okay. It's okay. You can talk about yourself. I'm giving
I
you
know, I
permission.
appreciate it.
Brag on yourself a little bit.
I,
Yeah.
I do this sort of
Yeah.
ninja jujitsu thing when people say they're proud of me, and I try and deflect that and put and give somebody else the credit. I really don't like to take the credit for things. And I think a lot of that is because I really do believe that almost everything in life is a team sport. Nothing that we accomplish, we do, hardly anything that we accomplish, we do on our own. We all need each other. So I haven't done anything. I've done it with people. Um, but um, the thing that I'm most proud of is the work that I put in um, to get healthy. Holistically healthy, and to be a better human and a better partner and a better father and just a better human being. Um, I am like really like super fucking proud of myself for that, and really grateful.
And you should be. You should be. And you're right. Life is a group project. And like not enough people realize that. It's everyone. There's such a spirit of individualism, especially in the United States, that it's like that just it misses the mark. Like life is a group project.
Yeah, yeah. American individualism. I mean, that's the subject of a whole separate podcast, but it has not done us any favors.
Okay, now you can stop bragging about yourself and
Okay,
tell
great.
me what is your greatest opportunity for growth or improvement.
I'm going to say a couple things. I think one, right, like we did just talk about the work that I did, um, and I definitely want to find a way to help other people, especially other men, to maybe go help them in their journey, um, to continue, like come far, right, as a human being and as a person, and to like not rest on my laurels, to continue growing, to continue, or writing this next act, that we're about to embark on, right? I retired, new job, we're moving to Minnesota, we're going to be empty nesters pretty soon. Like we have this huge reinvention project that's happening, and I want to get it. I got to get it. We got to get it right, not just for our lives, but for everyone we're going to meet and everyone whose lives we're going to touch, in this next phase.
I might have an aside here. I didn't know you don't subscribe to kind of Christian faith, but check out Richard Rohr's Falling Upward.
Okay,
It's a really
I will.
interesting look at sort of the second half of life. It kind of aligns with what you were just saying there. It's like, trying to figure out like what's the meaning in that, like after you've done the career thing, you've done the family thing, like what's next? What's the meaningful thing in the second half of life? And it was a life-changing book for me.
I'll read it. And because I said, my spiritual life is still a work in progress, so I got to get that right. I got to, that needs a little bit more attention too.
Where do you feel the most vulnerable?
When I've harmed somebody, like this maybe seems weird, but like, yeah, when I know that I've like caused harm, and again, right, it can be with a friend, it can be with my family, like it's like something opens up in me like this gaping wound almost, and I feel incredibly vulnerable. And I used to, again, kind of like how I felt with anger, I used to try to like run away from that. And now I'm learning to sit with it more.
What's the hardest thing about being you in today's world? Like this is one of my favorite questions. Is I think like it's every guest has had a really different answer. So like, what's really hard about being you in today's world?
So I gotta be honest. I mean, I gotta be honest first, right? Like I got a lot of privilege, and a lot of good fortune, that a lot of people don't have. Um, One of the things that is really hard right now to sit with, and this is a little bit more like, we're not, it's not a politics show, but right, like I know a little bit more about like geopolitics in the world, and now I work in climate change. And so there's a piece of seeing, like, particularly as an American, there is a piece of sort of seeing what's happening in the world and what's happened to our country, and knowing sort of what that means for America and Americans of any political stripe. But like the rest of the world gets a vote. And I think a huge percentage of Americans have no idea what is coming down the road for this country, just in terms of like our role in the world, and what that all means. And again, also someone that works on like the climate crisis now, right? Knowing what is coming down the pike on that, right? And just sitting with that pain of what is happening, and what the world that we are bequeathing to our children. I find that every day, I find that unbelievably painful.
Yeah, I am with you on that. And it is, as you spent your entire career sort of in the throes of this, and sort of seeing how the system is supposed to work, and sometimes fail and sometimes do amazing things. I was a political science undergrad. I've like lived and breathed sort of this, our systems for a long time, even though I don't work in them. And I've never felt more despair over the state of where we are right now. So yeah, I hear you on that one. That one hits hard.
Yeah, it's tough to sit with.
So as you reflect on our conversation today, what's the one thing that surprised you? Is there something that you answered that maybe you didn't think you were going to reveal? Is there, a particular question that I asked, just, how you felt? Like, what surprised you?
I was actually really nervous. Like, not necessarily once we got into the conversation, but I was like super nervous in the run up to this. And I think I said to my wife, I'm like, I'm going to forget something. And she's like, it's your life. So I was nervous, and I wanted to, like, I don't know who's going to listen to this, but if there's like one person, particularly if there's one man who listens to this and something I said resonated, and helps them, like, that's what I want. Like, I wanted to, to say something that could maybe help somebody else, from my story. And so I was nervous. Once we got into it, I'm like, this is fun. But I was really nervous to begin with.
That's a good admission. So I think that leads perfectly into my final question, and in a way to wrap up our conversation today. Like, what advice do you have for men who are kind of struggling to find their place in this, really rapidly changing society? It's changing faster than I've ever seen it change in my 54 years. Yeah, I think you probably are experiencing the same thing. So, like, what advice do you have?
I get a couple of things. Whatever they're feeling, it's okay. It's their feelings, right? Like, it's never, you can't talk people out of how they're feeling. So whatever they are feeling, that's okay. And they got to get help. And that doesn't mean go to therapy. It can, right? It can mean go to therapy. But it needs to be help with other people in person. Men's groups, sports, family. It doesn't have to just be men, right? It can be with other women too, right? I mean, but just to take that feeling and whatever they're, to honor it and to own it, and to, like, to know that it is not just okay, but to be a healthy human is to have all this wide spectrum of feelings. And then to don't just sit with it by themselves, but to be with other people and to get help, and in community. And it's going to be different for every man. Yeah, whatever's right for them, do that.
Thank you. That's a fantastic the thought to end on. Really like that. Just connection. Like that to me. That's the thing that is missing with men today, and they think that online interaction is a replacement for real human connection, and it's not. Like, in that, I really think that is like the end all be all of our problems right now. Is there are a lot of men out there that are just, they think they have connection, but it's empty, and that ends up turning into really bad attitude, behavior, whatever you want to call it. It's not healthy for them. And then that turns into unhealthy for others too. So I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
Zach, thank you for the conversation tonight. I love this. I loved hearing your story. I'm sure others will hear your story and go, yeah, I can relate to that. And being really vulnerable about the struggles that you have. When I've mentioned to a couple of people, it's like, yeah, I'm having a career CIA guy on the podcast, and like everyone thinks like career CIA guy is going to be this like tough as nails kind of sort of life experience and everything. But you really shared how like those things are the experiences that you had are like really tough struggles, and that you had to sort of admit that you needed help, and that's I think it's a fantastic example for other men and other just other humans in our world today that can really take from your example. So thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciated it.
Oh no, thank you, Chris. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I think your show is really important, and I really felt honored that you reached out and you asked me to be a part of it. So thank you.
You can learn more about Illuminate at illuminate.substack.com. We are also streaming on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube. Thanks for listening and watching, and we'll see you at the next episode of Illuminate.